and welcome to the Greg Woodman podcast. I'm excited because today we have Chelsea Good, a Penn State graduate who just graduated a couple weeks ago from New Zealand. And Chelsea, welcome.
Thank you.
Chelsea, just to jump right into it, a little bit about your background. New Zealand, and here you are at Penn State, now a graduate.
Yeah.
How'd you get here?
That's an interesting question. I do have a little bit of an unconventional path. So I am from New Zealand, as you said. I did my first year at the Victoria University of Wellington in our capital city, and I came to Penn State in January of 2023, I think, on what was supposed to be a 12-month study abroad. Except I absolutely fell in love with the place, and I never went home, and here I am, 3.5 years later, graduated, and hopefully get to stay a little bit longer.
And so your plans going forward?
Again, interesting question. It is a little bit difficult being an international student. I get what's known as 12 months of OPT training. So I am authorized to work in America for 12 months. And then after that, we'll require sponsorship. I do plan on hanging out in America for the next few years, but we'll have to see how that goes.
And 3.5 years here at Penn State. What are the takeaways?
I'm the biggest fan of this place. I wouldn't have stayed if I wasn't. I think that Penn State just has this absolutely infectious energy that just grabs whoever has the pleasure of touching it. I had never experienced anything like being here, and I just wasn't willing to give that up. I mean, university back home is great. We have an incredible education, but it is very much just that. You go to class and you take your exams and you do your homework and you get your degree. Whereas I feel like Penn State is much more a lifestyle and much more an experience. And to me, that was so exciting.
And your 3.5 years here, this exuberant lifestyle you speak of, what are some of the things that captured you?
I think that the biggest part for me was what you guys call college spirit. We just don't have that. I never heard that term. I never experienced that. And I've really tried to boil it down over the last few years. And I think it really comes down to size. I mean, as such a big country, you have these sports teams, right? And everyone has their sports team, whether it be a college or whether it be something else. And from that sports team comes rivalry. And from rivalry comes pride. And from pride comes what you call this college spirit. And we just don't have that back home. I would never wear Victoria University of Wellington merch. I would never go watch a sports game. There's barely any teams you could even watch. Whereas here, there's just this deep set pride that, we are Penn State, right? This whole idea that everyone is so proud to be from Penn State is something that, to me, is incredibly exciting.
So you were a big tailgater here?
Oh, absolutely. I never learned the rules of football. I tried very hard. It's too complicated for me. I don't know why they made so many rules, but tailgating is something I could get behind.
Did you go to the games?
I did.
And so you would be in the student section cheering, wearing white?
100%. I never lasted past halftime, but I'm a big fan of the cheerleaders and the band at halftime, so I always stayed for that.
That's great. And why did you select, even for the 12-month study abroad program, why did you choose Penn State?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I was given a list of, I'm not sure how many schools, maybe 10 to 15, and I looked them all up on TikTok, and there's this one video of the Penn State whiteout that my brothers were obsessed with. I think they're playing Mo Bamba in the background, and the crowd's going crazy, and there's 100 and something thousand people, which is more than my city back home, all packed into the stadium. And it was just absolute peak American college lifestyle. It looked like every American movie I'd ever watched, and I fell in love with it on that video. I got here, it was even better in real life. So it was a bit of a random choice, but it was a good one.
Wow. What's the name of the song?
I think it's Mo Bamba.
And it was the whiteout game.
Yep.
And
the
you
team's
saw it
running
on
out,
TikTok.
everyone's going crazy. Yeah, my brother sent it to me.
And then you chose Penn State. What was number 2 on your list?
I don't even know what I put for number 2 or 3. I think I got to pick my top 3, but Penn State was number 1, and clearly the other 2 weren't important enough to remember.
And what did you study here at Penn State?
So I had a major in agribusiness management, and then mine is in creative writing and entrepreneurship innovation.
Got it.
So a bit of a strange mix.
And now you arrived here at Penn State when AI was just taking off.
Yeah.
And so in this moment of time, and it is June 6th, 2026. It's June 2nd, 2026. What was it like to experience AI and the impact on your college career?
Yeah, I mean, I was the biggest laggard of AI ever. I was very resentful towards it. I was very judgmental towards people that would use it at first. And I've spent a lot of time exploring those opinions since. And it very much was resentment that came from jealousy. I was very upset that I went through all my high school years and all my first years of college, and I had to do everything by hand, and it was so hard. And then this incredible technology came in, and I felt like everyone had it a lot easier than I did. And so out of some moral high point that I thought I was standing on, I resisted it for a very long time. I thought it was taking the easy way out. And last semester a little bit, but this semester in particular, I have come around to it and explored that it actually can, if you use it in the right way, it's not necessarily making life easier, but making you capable of so much more. It's not the easy way out if you use it in the right way. And I think that if I had adopted that attitude a lot earlier, my experience with it would have been a lot different. So the resentment has turned around to bite me a little bit, and it's resentment towards myself for resisting it for so long.
Well, I appreciate that insight. Now, the commencement speakers around the country who are speaking about AI, I don't know if you're following that, are getting booed. They're getting booed heavily by college graduates and some parents in the crowd, and so those involved with AI are in shock of like, why are college students booing any speaker that gets up there and say, this is the biggest inflection point and this technology is going to create the next renaissance, and they get booed. Have you followed any of that?
I haven't seen that. Are they booing them because they support AI or because they don't?
Because they support AI and they're trying to motivate, commencement, let's, go on to the world and conquer it, and yet these speakers are in shock. And now it's like happening all over the country over the last couple of weeks that people at a visceral level are just booing Eric Schmidt, and some of these other speakers. And so there's a real backlash happening amongst certainly recent grads. And you had to go through it, and you talked about your own kind of...
I would think that perhaps, I can't speak to everyone's opinion, but I would, if I had to hazard a guess, I would say it would probably be from something quite similar, like an old school view that these kids are using this technology and they're not writing their own essays and they're not taking their own exams and they're taking the easy way out. They're not using any brain power. And sure, that is one potential aspect of AI. And if you use it in the wrong way, I can see how that's very frustrating. But what we spent a lot of time talking about this semester is that when you have a tool like AI and you put it in the right hands and you educate someone on how to do that, you're capable of so much more. And that inflection point that you're talking about is so right, because the education system is changing. What's the point in sitting these paper or online exams where you can easily just look up the answer, you copy it in from AI? I agree, no one's learning anything from that. But instead, if you take it from the perspective of instead being more creative or more original in your ideas, as opposed to just memorizing and regurgitating things, that is where we're going. And I suppose that's scary. And when things change like that, people do bite back. But I think you can only resist it for so long.
Well, and so at the root of it, would you say it's fear?
100%.
Now,
change is scary.
Change is scary, and this tool is quite a change, and it's so
100%.
That's why I wanted to say the date here, because it's advancing so fast that a year from now, looking back at this podcast, we're going to be chuckling a little bit, like we had no idea
where we were going to get to
of the capacity of this tool. Like you, Chelsea plus AI. I'm reading can create $1 billion company now.
That's a big change.
And, what used to take thousands of employees, 3 people, like 3 high school kids just created $1 billion company by using AI chatbots that does market research.
Yeah.
And like they're the hottest thing ever. And there are 3 kids in high school plus AI.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. In the right hands, it can unlock so much capability, as opposed to viewing it as cutting corners. It's not necessarily taking the easy way out. I think we can do a lot with it.
Yes. And so for our audience, Chelsea was in my class, an entrepreneurial leadership class this past semester, and I asked you to lead a lecture on fear versus love. You kind of tweaked it to fear versus want.
Yes.
And you did an amazing job. So if we're afraid of it, in context of like the lecture and the seminar that you gave to 45 students, Where is this fear versus want thing? And speak a little bit about how you deal and mitigate fear as it relates to AI in your own life at this point in the snapshot in your movie.
Yeah. So for a little bit of context on that lecture, I based it around this book that I've read that's become such a big part of my life this semester, Viktor E. Frankl's man's search for meaning. And so I think I pulled out the quote from the book, sort of like the central thesis of the book. A man who has a why can be almost any how. And that's how that whole fear versus want title came around for it. And I think that, like I said, change is scary. But a lot of the things that I talked about in this lecture was you can be afraid of something, but the biggest part of overcoming that fear is finding a reason that makes it worth it. So for something like AI, yeah, change is scary. The education system's going to change. The workforce is going to change. Gosh, our day-to-day lives are going to change. But if you can find a reason for using this AI, perhaps it is that you can create more things, or you can start these $1 million businesses, or you can bring to life a passion project. If you can find something that is your want, that is your why, that is your reason, and to you, that means enough, that is the reason to get over the fear. If you hold that reason in your heart, sure, it is scary, and you're not discounting the fear. Change is scary. We've established that. But if you have something that means enough to you that you can wake up and face that fear every day, you keep that in your mind, it makes it so much easier.
And you mentioned to the class, too, a famous quote from New Zealand.
Yeah.
What was that quote again?
So it's a quote from someone called Tana Umaga, and he was a rugby player. I think he was the captain of the All Blacks at one point, but don't quote me on that. And it goes, I can't teach you want, I can't want for you. Which is very fascinating. We have a tradition in my family. The back of the toilet door, we write quotes on. So you sit on the toilet and in the morning you look at all of these inspirational quotes, and that one's right in the center of the door. So I've spent a ridiculous amount of time looking at this and pondering it. And to me, I can't teach you want is an important thing. You can give someone all of the skills that they need to do something. You can give them whatever assignments and make them meet deadlines. But at the end of the day, you cannot force that inspiration into them. You can try as much as you want, but when it comes down to it, want is something that's internal, and to achieve something, you have to want it bad enough.
And very interesting about your bathroom.
Yeah.
And is it a whiteboard in there?
No, it's just a painted door. It's written in Sharpie.
And so you each write quotes on it?
Yep, it has to be Dad's handwriting only, but you can submit the quotes, he can review them, and if you're lucky enough, it makes the cut.
Well, interesting enough, I had on our bathroom wall quotes also, but they were pre-printed.
Okay.
You know, there's about 80 inspirational quotes, and my children have memorized all of them.
Yep.
And in a lot of their speeches and swimming banquets, whatever, they'd always use one of the quotes.
Yep.
So interesting. Talk a little bit about your mom and your dad.
In what context?
Well, you are this student, and I had 90 students this semester, and you stood out just as very unique, class favorite, in winning all the cases and everything else. And so I always, as I get to know students, and you had to write a life plan, I always kind of go upstream and say, well, I want to know more about their parents because they seemingly produce this very unique, product called you.
Yeah.
And so in this quote thing is very interesting, is that at what age did you start reading these quotes?
I honestly couldn't even tell you. They've been on that door as long as I can remember. We actually just built a new house on the property, and we took the door from that bathroom, this old, oh gosh, it's got to be over 100 years old, the old house. We took the door and we've put it in this new house. It's not even a functional door anymore. It's just, I don't know, a wall decor.
Well, and what was fascinating to me is, I'd attempt to have a lecture and I'd attempt to have the class engage in what we talk about why things, the why versus the what versus the how.
Yeah.
And my thesis often is most college students have been raised to be how people, to be able to memorize, to be able to spit things back and get A's. You always came up after class and threw a New Zealand quote at me or a Viktor Frankl quote and said, this is what I think you were trying to say, Greg. And I was blown away that philosophically you were at this why level in a class of how people. And can we attribute it back that you were studying these quotes at age 7 and just, these little parables that you would wrestle in your mind? It activated the why part of your brain, the strategic part, the philosophical part of your brain in a world that memorizes. And that's why I get intrigued with a student like you. And then I start asking you questions and start reading your stuff closer. And then it always gets back, I have found, to the parents.
Yeah.
Is that you were raised in a unique environment that allowed you to be in flow at a younger age versus just being a robotronic test taker.
Yeah. I think For sure. I mean, we talked a lot about in the class, it was an engineering class, obviously, about these kids that have been put into boxes their whole life and perhaps study certain things because that's what their parents wanted them to do and have never really explored that there are other alternatives and other paths that you can take. And I'm very lucky that I come from a family with parents who have supported whatever path I wanted to take, which has allowed me this creative freedom to explore different things, which I'm very grateful for. I think that in terms of the context of my parents and instilling this why thinking into me at a very young age, a big part of my life growing up was that every night for dinner, the family sat down together at the table. It doesn't matter what you're doing, what extracurriculars you have, we make a time for dinner every single time. And we sit down and we're not allowed to have any devices and we play a game called Favorite Part of the Day. And we've played this every night for my whole life. And you have to say your favorite part of the day, your least favorite part of the day, and then what you learned about your day. Doesn't matter if we have guests, they have to play too. It's a rule of the good family. And I think that I've never really considered perhaps the aspect that had on my life was just a part of daily routine. But I think that taking the time to sit down as a family like that, have open dialogue, talk about perhaps what your favorite was, what your least favorite, and then what you learned, combined with these quotes and this open discussion, I think you're definitely right. I grew up in an environment where why thinking was not only encouraged, but celebrated.
Wow. And your last name is Good.
It is.
The Rules of the Good Family.
100%.
I think there's your book.
Yeah.
And your parents can co-author with you.
Yep.
And you can unlock the secret to the meaning of life.
Yeah.
Viktor Frankl would tip his hat.
The good life.
The good life. And
Yeah.
it's so simple recipe that you were sitting down every night and around a family
Every
dinner.
single night.
That was teaching gratitude. It was teaching just communication, and so interesting. And so a little more about the philosophy that your mom and dad, where did that structure come from of this recipe for the good life, the good family, that is just a very simple recipe to follow that very few people are doing that now.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I'm not sure if it was something that they grew up with or not, or whether it's something that they established together. But I know it's not a thing that a lot of my friends had, and they loved coming over to our house for dinner. My mum's love language is cooking for people, so she loves to feed, and these people would come over and sit down at the table with us and talk about how, every night for dinner, they all eat at different times or they all eat different meals. And I always thought that was so weird because I'd never had anything else. And reflecting now, obviously I'm in college, I'm on the other side of the world from my family and I cook dinner for myself every night. It's still something that I love to do. I invite my friends over for dinner all the time. I think that a meal is something that should be shared and it's such a good opportunity to connect with other humans. And it's definitely something that I would continue with my own family. I think that you're right, such a simple thing, but it is really important. I mean, humans need connection, and to share it over a meal at the end of the day and reflect on your day, that's really important.
So if your mom's love language, and I love that expression, is to gather and serve food and have community and connection, what's your dad's love language?
I think, first of all, to touch on mom, there's a concept in Māori society called manaakitanga, and it basically means hospitality in a basic sense. And it's this whole idea that people sit down over kai, which is the Māori word for food, and share connection. And my mum's Australian, which is, a little bit of context, but she speaks basically fluent Māori, and she's adopted this culture so wholeheartedly as her own. And manaakitanga is now one of her values. I think that if mum's value is manaakitanga, I'm not sure what dad's would be. As I said, we just built this new house out at Pukahina, which is our family home now, and part of it has been creating this staircase. This is going to be quite a random story, but part of the staircase is each step has a carving on the base of the step, and it's a Māori shape, and each Māori shape represents a different thing. Things like whānau, which is family, and aroha, which is love, manaakitanga, which is basic human connection. And so as a family, we sat down and talked about what things we value and what things we find important, and then got a Māori artist to translate that into a visual representation and then carved it into this staircase that you have to put your feet on every single day. So I'm not sure that I technically have the words for what dad's vision for life is or what mum's vision for life is, but more so that they spend a lot of time thinking about what it is.
So they measure twice, cut once, and they're very strategic versus tactical.
Yeah, very, very deliberate, 100%.
And so, wow. And how do you spell what's the...
Manakitunga. I'm not even sure I could spell that.
And that's an Australian...
So our native people in New Zealand are called the Māori, Maori. And that's one of the cultural words. I don't think it translates directly to hospitality, but that's the closest.
Okay.
The closest translation.
Okay, so we went upstream a little bit to find out the creation and
Yes.
why you are who you are and kind of your value system. So here you are at Penn State.
Yes.
White out, 50,000 students. You're sitting side by side with people largely from Pennsylvania or the Mid-Atlantic states, New Jersey, Virginia. What's it like being here surrounded by people of a different culture and different value systems, it seems?
I think this is something that I definitely didn't expect and what a lot of other people don't expect. We both speak English. Obviously, English is my first language. English is your first language. But the cultural differences was something that absolutely caught me off guard. I thought that, I'm going to America. I've seen plenty of American TV shows. I know what it's going to be like. I know the way they're going to speak. We can communicate very clearly. But the cultural differences are absolutely astounding. And I found that over the past 3 years, I've developed what I like to call my American filter. And I don't even really notice that I've put it on until I go home and I find it, sort of melting away. But in order to connect with Americans differently, better, I suppose, I have to phrase things in a certain way and I have to filter the things that I'm saying and shape the context that I present them in. And it did take me a while to figure that out, probably about 12 months. There's so many different things that I could say, but I think the biggest is that back home we're a lot more direct and confrontational than I found Americans are here. And I spent my first semester here and I didn't realize that and didn't filter myself. And I had one particular instance where I was talking to this new person that I met and they turned around and said to me, are you French or are you just really, really rude? And I looked at them and I went, oh, wow. I'm definitely not French. And after that moment, I had to sort of reevaluate the way that I was saying things because I didn't realize that I could say stuff back home, not even what I was saying, perhaps the way I was saying it, and that Americans weren't receiving it in the same way. So it's definitely been a lesson in cultural differences, learning to adapt here.
Well, okay. And so you come here to Penn State and the cultural differences, and interesting that you were considered abrasive or assertive because you're very direct.
Very much so.
And so you flourish here at Penn State. You shared with me that you've never gotten a B. You're a 4.0 student.
Yeah.
And you kind of rocked just about every class you were in. You became a MC for your college. You were a marshal at your graduation. So you come into this new environment and you thrive and you flourish. Why?
I think I just want so much out of life, which sounds like such a cop-out answer. But I came to America. I packed up my life at 18 into 2 suitcases. I said goodbye to my parents. Never been on a plane by myself before. And I stepped foot off and I think I flew into Chicago first of all. And I'd never seen an airport that big in my life, especially not by myself. And I didn't know a single person in this whole big wide country. And I just arrived here and it was this fresh start in this clean state and I could do whatever I wanted. And so I decided that I wanted to do everything. And I had this newfound zest for life. I've always, sort of had my finger in multiple pies at once. But I came to Penn State and suddenly there was all of these extracurriculars that I'd never had back home and all of these sports games that I could go watch and all of these cool classes that I could take. And, I'm on the other side of the world from my family and I've sacrificed so much to be here. Why would I not want to make the most of it? And so that's 100% been my philosophy. Very much a yes person, sometimes a little bit too so. I do tend to take on a lot of things, but if I'm going to be all the way over here, I'm going to say yes to as much as I can.
So talk about this literary piece that you submitted and was published and the topic that you wrote about.
Yeah. So it's titled Bloodlines. It's a nonfiction piece. Traditionally, I am a fiction writer. That's why I added the creative writing minor. I'd never written something about me in my life. And I had to take this nonfiction class, and our final assignment was that you had to send off one of your pieces to a few publishing agencies. I honestly forgot about it until I got the emails back, but I was super excited and it reinvigorated this sort of energy for me. And it's why I did end up sending my poetry collection off. But it was titled Bloodlines, and it was a mix between a visual and a written piece. So it's very deliberately presented on the page. Presented almost like a family tree genome sequence connection thing. with me at the top, my two parents, sorry, at the top, and arrows connecting them to me and my two brothers. And it's all about how my family relates in my eyes to the topic of blood. I went last summer to get my blood taken with my mum because I didn't know what my blood type was. And I thought that was a very fascinating topic, and I couldn't believe that I didn't know what it was. And I had this idea in my head that it would be something really rare, which is kind of random. I mean, I think you'd want your blood type to be common because if anything happens, you'd want to have someone that could help you with common blood. But in my head, I had this like deep desire to have this really rare blood type. So we went to get them tested, and I didn't pass the qualifications. I have a quite rare genetic heart condition that comes from my mom, actually. So we weren't able to get our blood taken, and I never found out what my blood type is, and I have no idea what it is to this day. And so I wrote this piece exploring the idea that I didn't know what my blood type was, but I knew what blood meant to me. And so what did my family mean to me within the lens of blood? Which is kind of random, but it was a very explorative piece, and I enjoyed writing it very much, and I learned a lot about myself and my family throughout it, and obviously other people liked reading it too, which was quite a bonus.
That's great. Now, you also have some ink on your arm tied.
I do, yeah.
Speak to that a little bit.
So this is, again, a Māori custom, very much similar to the carvings that we have on the steps. The traditional one is called a tāmoko, but because I don't have a lineage of Māori blood, it's called a kirituhi, which is explaining a white person's story through Māori means. And it is a very cultural practice back home. I sat down with an artist. Her name is Sarah Palmer Pengelly. She's a wonderful Māori artist. And you sit there and have a conversation very much like what we're having right now. And you tell her about, you know, my family and my lifestyle, my ancestry, my connection to Māori culture, where I live, the values that I hold dear, the things that are important to me. And I lay down, and 2.5 hours later, I looked up and this was on my arm. So she freehanded the whole thing. It's essentially a visual representation of what it is to be Chelsea and what this whole picture of who I am is. It grows with your life, which is pretty cool. You know, once I get my own family and I achieve my own things, I sit down and update it. But it's something that's very special to me. It's such a great conversation starter. First of all, I get to talk about New Zealand. I get to talk about my culture. But it really, truly is a visual representation of what it means to be Chelsea.
Wow. And you mentioned a heart issue. Mm-hmm. Speak to that a little bit.
So I have what's known as arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy, or ARVC, which is a quite rare genetic heart condition that is one of the only ones that gets worse with exercise, which is quite fascinating. I mean, most heart conditions, exercise helps. It comes from mum. My grandma has it as well, but she never exercised to the extent that it was discovered. Mum used to do Ironman, and she ran the Oxfam 100 kilometers and all of this stuff. And one day she got really sick and went to hospital. And then we discovered it was this, and all of us kids had to get tested. And I tested positive for the gene, and neither of my brothers did, which was quite fascinating. It's extremely rare in general, more so in women, and it tends to run through the line of women in our family. And obviously, we talked about how I swim, and I was basically told that I'm not allowed to swim anymore. And the more that I exercise, the worse it's going to get. And swimming, competitive swimming in particular, is a very intense sport. And I guess this, again, comes down to this whole fear versus love thing. And I had to sort of make the decision that I could stop swimming and perhaps protect my heart. And obviously that's what everyone in my life told me that I should do because they love me very much. And I'm lucky to have that. But I love swimming, and I love competing, and I love exercising, and it's so good for me. It's so good for my mental health. It's so good for my life. And so you weigh up the fear and the love, and in this case, the love won. And swimming's not the kind of thing that I'm willing to give up.
And so literally when you swim, and you competed at nationals this year, I believe broke a record.
Yes, a club one, just for the skill.
But your love versus fear, you're taking the risk that this is hurting your heart and shortening your life.
Yeah.
And you're opting to do that.
100%. Essentially, every time my heart rate gets over 160 beats per minute, roughly 80% of my max, it does essentially irreversible damage to the right ventricle in my heart. But
okay,
what are you going to do?
I have a heart issue, and I choose to run also.
Yeah.
So we're in the same cardio club kind of thing there of either we're smart or stupid.
Yeah.
It's to be determined.
Yeah. I mean, you could live a slightly shorter life, but it's more fulfilled, or you could live a little bit longer, but perhaps not have the quality that you enjoy. And I mean, you weigh it up, and to me, that's what came out on top.
Okay, so here you are, just graduated last month, and you have your life in front of you.
Yeah.
And I read your life plan.
Yes.
And we had 15 weeks of various prompts. And with someone with such vast skills, such a solid value base, what's it like to have so many options ahead for you?
I think that it's a very scary thing. I think that I'm very grateful, as I said, to have grown up in a family where my parents accept whatever I choose to do. And so I have had the freedom to explore all of these things. But suddenly, I've gone through the school system, and life is very small when you're in school. You get your assignment and you complete it, and you get to the end of the semester, and then there's the next semester. And the future is very short term, and you have goals to achieve, and you tick off all of these boxes. And then suddenly I've graduated and I have the rest of my life ahead of me, and I have no idea what I want to do. And I think, as you said, I have a wide range of passions and a wide range of interests and perhaps a wide range of skills. And so it's a matter of, what do I put my mind to? I have a lot of passion to give. I have a very competitive nature. And so what I put my mind to, I would hope that I would excel at. But how is one supposed to decide that? There's so many years ahead of me and so many opportunities and so many choices that I sort of hit this wall of, wow, what do I commit to? I still don't have the answer to that.
Well, let me read you a quote.
Yeah.
It's back to the fear versus love thing. And this is by Marion Williamson. And she wrote a book, A Return to Love. And I just want to get your response to this situation or inflection point in your life. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Then it goes on and I pick up, your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So I'm curious, what does that quote mean to you?
I think that's a very inspirational quote, first of all, but also something that's very prominent in today's day and age here in America, but even so back home, perhaps more so, perhaps. Another cultural difference between America and New Zealand is that back home in New Zealand, we have what we call the tall poppy syndrome. And I think the best way to describe it is that if you had a field of poppies and one poppy was taller than the rest of them, as the poppy, you're supposed to cut yourself down so you're the same height as everyone else before someone else can come along and cut you down, because we all should be equal in the end. And so New Zealanders inherently have this opposition to presenting yourself as anything more than the people around you. It's seen as very rude to brag about yourself, very inappropriate to share your successes. And this has created so many cultural issues. There's so many papers on it, so many studies on it. It's very bad for the mental state of the younger generations. But I think that aside from New Zealand, it's something that people deal with in today's day and age in general. And, I've just graduated and I'm trying to get a job. And it's very difficult to flip the script and sit down with these employers and say, you should hire me because I'm amazing and I can do this and I can do that. Whereas I think that when you're in a situation with your peers, you're taught to perhaps dampen that and to play it down. How'd you do on the test? I was fine. I probably could have done better. Whereas inside you could perhaps be very proud about it. So I think that's perhaps one of the things that is most wrong with today's society, is that we're taught you shouldn't talk about yourself like that, whereas successes should be celebrated, not hidden away.
Well, you have so much, and you said it, to serve, to give.
Yeah.
And so what do you think is the way you're going to find flow to maximize your vast skill set and your value system, where you can give more? And I always go back, I'm watching a lot of documentaries about the Beatles.
Yeah.
They have so much footage of those guys coming up with their songs and their infighting and how George Martin did this. And, and so I'm just fascinated that those guys from Liverpool, age 16, 17, created, 400 songs that are the best in the world. Four guys coming together and they seem to be in flow, and then they break up, so what if you're Paul McCartney?
I mean, I think it comes down to this whole crisis that I had at the end of your class. We'd spent all of this time talking about why, and I had the best time in this class. I was the biggest adopter of it. And I was like, yeah, I've got my why. And then suddenly I'm graduating and I have to get a real job. And why seems so big and scary now. And I face this big crisis. I think the easiest way that I can break it down in terms of finding flow state or whatnot is that you can have your one big life why, but sometimes it's okay to just wake up in the morning and find your why for that day. And to someone like me, that's a lot easier to comprehend. It's a lot easier to digest, and it's a lot easier to face that I can wake up in the morning and perhaps I don't have a huge philosophy for life. And maybe today I'm not going to have that. But if I can just find my purpose for that one singular day, then that's okay. And that's what I'm starting to realize is that, yes, I have to get a job and yes, I have to have a career, but what I do today is not necessarily what I'm going to be doing in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Committing to something like that, you can give it your all, but it doesn't have to be all of you. And I can pivot and I can wake up one day and realize, I'm not in flow state anymore. And quitting isn't necessarily quitting. It's not failure. It's instead pivoting and finding something else. But as long as each day you have a little bit of a focus on what your why is for that day, I think that's good enough. Or I'm telling myself that.
No, you just described design thinking.
Yeah.
It's the iterative process, minimal viable product. You're always getting new data points and you reserve the right to pivot, change, weave, and bob.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating to me is you've gone through an entrepreneurial leadership class, and the hallmark of the class is you can work outside of traditional boxes. You can create the magic of and. It's not either or. You can do both, and it's often entrepreneurs think there's a sucker's choice. If you have to go either or, why not do both?
Yeah.
Why not look at what's flow? And you love to travel. You love freedom, and that's the hallmark of what entrepreneurial leadership is about, creating an existence where you can have it all, make money, be in flow state, have freedom, continually iterate and weave and bob and kind of meet the market as long as you're market sensitive.
Yeah.
And so you, and that's why I'm so delighted to have you on this podcast at this snapshot of your movie is you have a whiteboard in front of you now and you have so many options and you're going to get so many offers now that you've decided not to get your MBA and get into the job market. So I wanted to capture on film because we want to track you now going forward of like what X are you going to put on the pipe, as Steinmeitz did for Henry Ford? Like, we're only just a collection of our strategic decision making.
Yeah.
And hearing how you were brought up by your parents, and boy, I love the whiteboard and the steps and the bloodlines and the community and connection you had at dinner. So I've also studied that people in your situation, high performers, unique, special skills you have, it does cause a lot of anxiety and pressure because you have more options than most. You can go into marketing, you could go into product development, you can go into, and you have so many opportunities as you're looking at New York City and jobs. Speak a little bit to the anxiety and the pressure that you have to check another box called a prestigious position and secure income, and then you have to get your visa. What's that pressure like?
I have always put a lot of pressure on myself. As we've said, I've been quite a high achiever because I am very competitive and I have very high standards for myself. And that's always been an internal thing for me, never really come from other people. And I think that when you're in school, that's very easy to cope with because the thing you have to achieve is to get good grades. And that's very simple. You have that end goal in mind. And then we're talking a lot about how I've just graduated and suddenly the end goal isn't necessarily there. The end goal, I suppose, is getting a job. And there's no learning outcomes for that. You can't tick off that and get an A in that. And so what does it mean to get a good job? Is it one that has a high paying salary? Is it one that's in a cool city? Is it one that allows me the freedom to travel and be creative and do the things that I love? And to be suddenly faced with this big wide world where I don't have that direction anymore, I need to create my own direction, is very scary because that internal pressure is still there. I still want to succeed, but I'm not sure what I need to succeed at. And so it's sort of going in this big spiral of I want to do something successful. I want to impress myself. I want to live up to my own standards, but I'm not sure how to get there. And so I think that that's one of the biggest struggles for me going from school into the big wide world is suddenly it's very open and I do have a lot of opportunities and I have a lot of choices to make. And you got to start somewhere, I suppose. Just got to take that leap.
Well, and getting to know you over 15 weeks is that, and I suffered the same thing. You don't want to get locked into something where you then have to say no to other things.
Yeah, very much so.
And then you got to, go into a big company that's 40, 50, 60 hours a week, especially as a competitor as you are, you're going to go all in.
100%.
But you know, if you say yes to that, you're saying no to this freedom on your ability to pick up and travel. And you know, you're going to be in a box.
Yeah, I mean, as we've said, I like to have my finger in multiple pies at once. I've had all these extracurriculars on the go. I've sort of always operate at 110%, but across a lot of different things. And I think that's very true. A part of this fear that I have internally is that choosing one of these routes feels to me like I'm blocking off all of the others. And so I'm at this crossroad, really, looking down all of these paths, and I have to take a step down one of them. And I suppose it is a matter of finding this and, yes, I can have this, and how can I have this as well? And it's quite a juggling act, but it's something I'm exploring at the moment.
And what's the stress level?
It's pretty high.
And that's all self-imposed.
100%. Yeah, it's pretty high. It's crunch time.
And what advice would you give to people who are going through similar decision-making stress?
Yeah.
And however, you did say, if you use design thinking, that life is an experiment, it's a laboratory. If you say yes and do this for so long, you also reserve the right to say no and then switch jobs.
100%.
And that's what most people are doing now. They're not, they're jumping around a little bit until they find where they fit.
I mean, I think that I've been really trying to tell myself that lately because it's not something that I necessarily pictured for myself. My original thought process is that it's a failure if you get a job and you don't like it and you don't want to do it anymore. I mean, it's called quitting. You quit your job, and I just don't like that phrasing in general. But I've been trying to tell myself this design iterative thinking process. And I think that the biggest thing that's helping me with that is sitting down for these conversations with people like you, Greg. But the biggest part of my last few weeks has been getting anyone and everyone on the phone to give me advice and to talk me through it and to connect me to other people and to help. As I said before, like the baseline of being a human is connection. And when you get stuck in your own head like that, the best thing you can do to get out of it is to let the words come out your mouth.
Well, and back to the Mary Williamson quote, return to love.
Yeah.
You know, my whole thesis is if we can get people in love first with themselves and then with what they're doing and their skills and ability match, you're in flow.
Yeah.
And then it's not work, it's play almost. And you get rewarded heavily because you're doing what you're naturally good at.
100%. I think one of the things that stood out to me from this class that we had was, I'm not even sure when you mentioned it. It might have been in week 2 and it probably never came up again, but you said that when you were 6 years old, what did you love doing? And I think about this all the time, genuinely, when I was 6, you know, what did I love doing? And how can I make a career out of doing that again, but in grown-up form? And I think that that's such a great way of visualizing it. And you'd be surprised how many people I've said that to over the last week.
We got to put that on the video in grown-up form.
100%, yeah. How can I be a grown-up 6-year-old doing what I loved? I'm still figuring that out, but I hope I get there one day.
Well, a bit of advice that I give is that I'm 67, turning 68 in a couple of weeks, and I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah.
And I found a 6-year-old picture of myself that I now use on my email just because it reminds me of that's when I was in flow and I was really good at it. And if I can get in flow doing that, and this is part of it, I enjoy this so much because, you know, you are such an interesting character and you're a character in your movie, as we talk about in class too. And what is intriguing from my position of even interviewing you or is that what if you are a Beatle? You know, what if you are like Motown, 19 in Detroit, you know, like the conventional thing, and I've been teaching entrepreneurship since 2007, is, and as you know, I'm kind of the anti-box checking professor.
Very much.
And I challenge the students that you guys are really good at checking boxes, and that's why you're sitting in this class and you're all perfect students, perfect SATs. This class is to kind of blow up the box a little bit and say there is an alternative to the next step that is been programmed as the safe route, and that is entrepreneurship, you know? And so when I sit across the table from you, and now we're on TV, is that the box that any one of these companies in New York are going to put you in, it gets down to, okay, $6,000, $7,000 a month. And maybe they pick up your visa. I just, in having worked with you and watching you perform amongst my 90 students and in context of 450 over the years, that almost says, that's just not right. You're too talented to be in that box. Now, if you justify that you're going to learn from a great boss who's going to teach you direct marketing or marketing skills, and you're going to be in New York and you're going to have fun and you're going to learn a lot, and it's a stepping stone into what your real talent is to contribute strategically to help and serve others maximize their potential of their brand or their consumer product or the human being. That seems to be where you were in flow in my class and dominated, and people saw you in your natural state and were blown away by it. And so I'm sitting here thinking as a, as a guide role that I'm trying to play as Annie Sullivan in a world with students is like, it's you can create hits of Paul McCartney, Lennon magnitude, and what would position you to be able to do that, where you can give more of yourself, as the Marianne Williamson quote said, give more of your skills and talent, and even if it's just taking what your parents have taught you guys and helping other families learn that on how they create a product and a brand like you are, you have so much to give.
I think that the best way that I could describe that is my end goal in my career is eventually to end up in strategy and directorship. As you said, that's very much when I'm in flow state, when I'm moving the pieces around and doing whatnot. And so the way that I have viewed this next stage in my life is just as that, as a stage. I stood there and I looked at the big wide world and the rest of my life, and I got really overwhelmed. And I did have to break it down. And I sort of said to myself, this next block of my life, the next few years, I'm going to work, and it doesn't have to be forever. It doesn't have to be my forever job that I'm going to build a career off, and I'm going to look back in 20 years and think on it as this like foundational aspect. But instead, it's just a small chunk of my life, and I just have to do something for the next few years. And then if I don't like it, design thinking, pivot, go travel, go somewhere random, see more of the world. Like I do have this deep yearning to see the world as we spend a lot of time talking about. But I think that the way that I do view it is as this educational part of my career. I'm not doing my MBA, as you said. I considered that for a very long time, and instead I've decided to take the leap to get this industry experience. And so I'm viewing it just as that. These next few years, this next stage of my life is what I'm titling in my book. The book of my life would be my industry experience chapter.
That's great. That's great. I want to thank you, Chelsea. This was great.
Thank you for sitting down with me. This is good fun.
This was great. And thank you for listening to the Greg Woodman podcast, and see you next time. Thank you.